Number 1. Custers' Last Stand. Over many years, since the Battle of the Little Bighorn has come to be known as the Custers' Last Stand. The battle occurred on June 25th and 26th, 1876, and was fought near the Little Bighorn River in Montana Territory. It is the most prominent battle of the Great Sioux War of 1876. In the battle were the Native Americans from the Lakota Sioux, the Northern Cheyenne, and the Arapaho. The Native Americans were facing off against the US Army's 7th Cavalry, under the command of General Armstrong Custer. Many famous Native American chiefs took part in this battle, including Gold, Crazy Horse, and Sitting Bull. Crazy Horse and Sitting Bull were later assassinated for their parts in the battle. When the battle was over, the invincible General George Armstrong Custer and his command were decimated and most were dead. Along with Custer, 2 of his brothers, a nephew, and his brother-in-law were all killed. Historians have long questioned why Custer tried to take on a vastly larger number. It is believed that Custer was after glory and should have waited for a backup before making his attack. In the present times, many people have seen strange things going on in the area of the battlefield. Some smell gunsmoke in the air and hear gunfire when there was no one in the area to fire guns. People hear horses running around them, but could not see any horses. Some people even have claimed to see blood-stained Custer standing near where he fell, with an arrow in his shoulder. Number 2. Battle of Stalingrad. The Battle of Stalingrad was the successful Soviet defense of the city of Stalingrad during World War II. Russians consider it to be the greatest battle of their Great Patriotic War, and most historians consider it to be the greatest battle of the entire conflict. It started the German advance into the Soviet Union and marked the turning of the tide of war in favor of the Allies. The Battle of Stalingrad was one of the bloodiest battles in history, with combined military and civilian casualties of nearly 2 million. The battle lasted for more than 5 months, with Soviets ultimately winning. Now, entire sections of the neighborhoods in the city are said to be extremely haunted by the dead. It is reported that the dead have continued living their normal lives as ghostly figures, roaming the places where they once lived. Some people even say they see wounded Soviet soldiers asking for cigarettes. Number 3. The Battle of Culloden. The Battle of Culloden on the 16th April 1746 was a bloody slaughter of the Jacobite rebellion, who wanted the Stuarts to return to the throne. In just 40 minutes of fighting, the entire army of Bonnie Prince Charles was dead. The chances of them succeeding was slim to non-existence as it was. The boggy ground not suited for the Highland charge, and on top of that they were vastly outnumbered by the government forces. The battle started with a flurry of artillery fire from both sides, but this quickly became a one-sided affair as the government troops vastly outnumbered and outskilled the Jacobite troops. The slaughter continued after the men were wounded and unable to fight, as government troops executed every man they could find, and ones that managed to get away were hunted down and slaughtered. Bonnie Prince Charlie had evaded the pursuing forces for 5 months throughout the Scottish Highlands, until he escaped to Italy via Isle of Skye, never to return. On the anniversary of bloody Battle of Culloden Moor, ghosts of soldiers fallen are said to rise again, and cries of wounded and clanking of steel weapons are heard. On many occasions, similar reports have been made of a tall man with drawn features in Towton being seen roaming the area. When approached, he is heard mumbling the word defeated, then suddenly vanishes. In 1936, there was a report from one woman who had lifted a tartan cloth that was covering one of the grave mounds, only to then discover the apparition of several wounded Highlander underneath it. Birds are said never to sing in the area surrounding these mounded graves, perhaps too afraid of the ominous atmosphere. There are also numerous wells all around the area which are said to be haunted. St. Mary's Well in particular is said to be haunted by the ghosts of the dead Highlanders. Culloden Well also has some mystery surrounding it. It supposedly offers a cure for ailments. Number 4. Marston Moor. The battlefield of Marston Moor is a desolate stretch of fields just west of city of York between the villages of Long Marston and Tadcaster. There is little to see there today, except a monument and a couple of worn explanation boards, but there is a heavy brooding atmosphere over the place, where 4,500 men lost their lives in just few short hours. The war in the north had swayed back and forth between the royalists commanded by the Earl of Newcastle and parliamentarian forces under the leadership of Fairfax's. By mid-1644, York itself was under the siege by the parliamentarians, and the king, desperate to retain control, sent his formidable nephew, Rupert of the Rhine North, to relieve the siege of York. The two armies met on the field of Marston Moor, and sat facing each other all day. Only as the twilight began to descend and Rupert had sat down for a supper, did the parliamentarians begin to move. The battle was fought well into the moonlit night between two evenly matched sides, and became a battle that royalists nearly won, and the parliamentarians nearly lost. It is probably only the presence on the battlefield of an outfit of superbly trained and disciplined cavalry under the command of Colonel Oliver Cromwell and the ill-disciplined Rupert's cavalry that influenced the result. The Earl of Newcastle's personal troops, known as his lambs for the white coats they wore, made the last stand for the royalists, having sworn to dye their coats red with the blood of their enemies. At the end of the night, the blood that stained their coats was their own. When the fighting finally stopped, 4,000 royalists lay dead, compared to 300 parliamentarians, and the north had been lost for the king. Following the conflict, the casualties were buried in mass graves, on unconsecrated ground and without ceremony. It is believed that those interred under such conditions cannot gain entry to heaven, and their restless spirits are condemned to walk the earth forever. Phantom soldiers are said to have been seen on Moor many times. The most reported type of experience of ghosts at Marston Moor is that of drivers having to brake suddenly for strangely dressed figures stepping across the road, only to have them disappear as suddenly as they appeared. Because reenactments of the battle are held occasionally, some witnesses think at first that some careless participants of the show are responsible for the near collision, only to discover later no such reenactment had taken place. Number 5. Stony Creek. The Battle of Stony Creek was a part of the War of 1812. The battle lasted less than 45 minutes, but heavy casualties were suffered on both sides, and the Americans lost their two generals which were captured in the battle. The Americans were soundly defeated even though they had 3,400 men compared to the British having only 700 men. It is known that only 1,328 of the Americans engaged in the battle. It is now known that the British were able to obtain the American password and used it to enter the American lines. The Americans were defeated and they withdrew after their two senior officers were captured. It is this action and the loss by the Americans that is credited with keeping the Americans from grabbing a large portion of eastern Canada. After the battle was over, in the vicinity of the present-day Stony Creek battle house, people started telling of seeing men dressed as British soldiers, walking around as if they were lost. However, if you approach them, they vanish almost at once. It is also in this area that people see smoke in the air and hear volleys of gunfire. People also see a large black dog that vanishes as quickly as it appears. Some people have told of seeing a wagon being pulled by a horse, but as it gets near you, it vanishes. Number 6. Cold Harbor Battlefield. The Battle of Cold Harbor was fought from May 31 to June 12, 1864 during the American Civil War. It is said to have been one of the bloodiest battles ever fought, and for weeks after the battle, the bones and decaying bodies of the killed were scattered on the ground across the battlefield. In the end, almost 32,000 men from both sides would be killed in the battle that went on for over 2 weeks. It was a costly battle to the Union forces, and it almost had them believing that they couldn't win the war against the Confederates. Union General Grant led his troops in a battle with the troops of Confederate General Lee, and it is said that the Battle of Cold Harbor was one of Grant's greatest regrets. The Cold Harbor battlefield is said to be one of the most haunted battlefields in the world. It is often reported in the local newspapers that people hear the sound of the battle still going on all these years later. People reported hearing gunfires, cannon fires, the screams of men and the horses galloping by where there are no horses. The ghost of Grant is often reported wandering about the battlefield, still haunted by what happened there. Number 7. Battle of Antietam. The Battle of Antietam was fought on September 17, 1862, at a place called Antietam Creek in Virginia. As hard as it may be to believe, the battle only lasted for 4 hours. But during that time, more than 23,000 men from both sides were killed. It was truly the worst day of battle for either side during the American Civil War. Most paranormal investigators who have been there say that this area, especially that area around the Burnside Bridge, is a hotbed of paranormal activity. Some people tell of seeing smoke in the air and the sound of gunfire and cannons being fired. A black horse with a man hanging from it by one foot is seen often near the bridge. Some people have walked upon soldiers in Union and Confederate uniforms lying around on the ground. Most people think they are reenactors, but when they approach the soldiers, they vanish. The nearby Episcopal Church, which was used as Confederate hospital, is also said to be haunted. Some people have walked into the church to a grisly hospital scene. It is said that the floorboards of the church were so stained with blood that not even sandpaper could remove it. Most of the men killed in the battle are buried in the area in shallow graves. In the area of the bridge, people often report hearing horses and wagons moving about. Number 8. Battle Abbey. In 1066, the Battle of Hastings took place with King Harold II and 7,500 of his Saxons defending against the invading Norman conquest of William, Duke of Normandy. William defeated Harold, and an abbey was built on Senlac Hill with a high altar said to have been placed on the very spot where King Harold perished. Apparently, building a site on that much bloodshed was a bad idea, considering that over the years there have been numerous bizarre reports. The Black Monk is said to haunt the archways and corridors at Battle Abbey. A lady also wanders the abbey, wearing a red dress. More poignantly, a knight on horseback has been reported on or around the anniversary of Battle of Hastings every October, moving across the battlefield. Since 1719, the abbey has been home of the Webster family, but the largest of the buildings, the Abbot's house, is currently occupied by a girls' school which is naturally not open to the public. Ghostly apparitions have also been noted in the ruined Great Hall. One afternoon in June 1971, Howard Shepherdson, a young guide, was conducting a party of visitors around the building and explaining the features to the crowd, when a young boy cradled in the arms of his fathers suddenly inquired, "Who is that man over there, Daddy? The one with the long sword?" Only the lad could see the phantom, though one or two others felt the presence of something. This was not the first occasion that the ghostly knight has been seen in the Great Hall, but it has been some years since anyone has stated categorically that they have witnessed it. Howard was convinced that the youngster could see the apparition, gazing as he had been for some seconds into the blank corner of the huge room. The description given later by the boy certainly matched that of the phantom. Number 9. The Battle of Towton. The Battle of Towton was a decisive battle between the armies of York and Lancaster in the Wars of the Roses. The battle took place on 29th March 1461, on a plateau between the villages of Towton and Saxton, about 12 miles southwest of York and about 2 miles south of Tadcaster. Towton was the largest and bloodiest battle ever to be fought on the British soil. It is thought that about 50,000 combatants were involved, and casualties are believed to have been in excess of 28,000, a staggering 1% of England's total population at the time. The battlefield today is pretty much in the same shape as it was in 1461. Archaeological work has discovered mass graves with skeletons showing various types of wounds. Some bones showed cuts from previous battles, with bones regrowing and healing to some extent, showing that some of these dead have been involved and suffered in previous battles. With thousands dead and buried, the place is naturally haunted by a vast array of spirits. A figure of a young lady is said to be seen weeping by the B1217 roadside. Who she is or why she cries is unknown. Perhaps the loss of her husband, her father, her brother, or even her whole family. It is also believed that every 7 years, the town of Towton will experience a similar heavy snowstorm. If one walks out into the snow, to the side of the battle, they'll see the two armies fighting for a little more than 3 hours. Then they disappear for next 7 years. Number 10. Battle of Gettysburg. The Battle of Gettysburg is widely known as one of the bloodiest battles in the American Civil War. It is estimated that the Union and Confederate forces lost a total of 56,000 men in the battle. Fought in July 1863, in the small town in southeastern Pennsylvania, the Battle of Gettysburg is viewed as the turning point for the Union in the Civil War. It's interesting to note that there was only one documented civilian death during the entire battle. She was a 20-year-old Jenny Wade who was making biscuits in her home in the town of Gettysburg when a stray bullet came through the wall and hit her in the head, killing her instantly. Down through the years since the battle, people all around the battlefield have made claims of seeing marching men, running horses, and hearing rifle and cannon fire. In the Comfort Inn and Suites opened in 2009 on Cemetery Ridge, many people have encountered strange and unusual things going on in their rooms. Spigots and sinks turn off and on at will, and bathroom and closet doors open and shut by themselves. People have also reported seeing soldiers dressed in Civil War uniforms walking through their rooms, sometimes in through one wall and out through other. People in the area claim to smell horrific smells of burning flesh. It was near this area where over 8,000 horses were piled in huge piles and burned. While most of the graves are clearly marked, not all of them are. Almost every year, new graves are discovered. It's often when these graves are disturbed that people report paranormal activity and sometimes report seeing ghosts. One of the spookiest things that people report is that when it's foggy on the battlefield, people see and hear soldiers and wagons pulled by horses over in the tree line. They often appear to be moving in the direction of the person hearing or seeing them. Many people over the years have run from the battlefield after having this happen to them.